good morning again for everybody. I'm happy to see all of you here in person or online at the start of the third day of the conference that we started with minor technical problems because our cameras were frozen, so we had to the system, and I hope that now everything goes smoothly with no problems, because I'm happy to have here Tine Béneker, our second keynote speaker. And Tine is a professor of geography and education at the Faculty of Science, Utrecht University, where she is the director of education at the Department of Human Geography and Spatial Planning and member of the program committee of the research theme Dynamic of Youth. For the geographic education community in the Netherlands, she has advisory role in national curriculum renewal projects and in the GeoFuture School project. Her main interest is in curriculum thinking and the relationship between scholarly knowledge, school subject knowledge, and young people's everyday knowledge. And in her keynote, she will focus on connecting everyday knowledge to school knowledge and scholarly knowledge. So, Tine, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin, and welcome everybody here in the room and online. I've seen you on the screen, so happy to have you all together. First of all, I would like to thank the committee, the organizing committee, and especially, well, you can't see it, but the man in the upper right corner. Can you help me to show the picture here? Because he's the connector in all of this, referring to the title of the conference. We met before, and we had a very good cooperation. We will continue with that, so I want to thank you for inviting me and organizing this incredibly complicated event, but you're doing very well. Well, I discussed with Martin where to talk about and what to choose as for my keynote lecture here. And we decided to come on this topic because it puzzles me for quite some time. And I will explain to you. And it puzzles me more and more since working with the ideas of powerful knowledge. And I think listening carefully yesterday and the day before, but yesterday especially in the forum discussion we had, the panel discussion we had, I think there are more people puzzled by this idea of how do school knowledge relate to everyday knowledge of kids we teach. And the question is about who do we teach. But then, if you start with such a topic, I felt, well, I'm not an expert in this. I think there are in our community people who are more expert in this, and maybe outside our community as well. So as soon as you start research and do your thinking, well, it's good to challenge yourself now and then, but then you know how that works. You open boxes, and then you open new boxes. And there are related boxes, so at the end there is a room, virtual room, all in your computer with open boxes. And in the end I had to move aside a lot of these boxes. They're waiting for tomorrow and more time. So I think I will engage you in my struggle to understand a bit of this, with the risk that at the end you tell me, well, we already knew. Maybe you even know better. But let's see. Then that's the case. If you talk about the students we teach, I think one of the first lessons in your teacher education program, also as I remember it myself, is that they tell you, well, if you teach a topic, you have to connect it to the things the students already know about this topic, and you have to make relations to their daily life is possible. But I think very often that's a bit obligatory, or it is not taken as seriously as maybe needed. So we all know, but do we do that, and how do we do that? And if you read, for example, the study and the research from Rob Lane in Australia with teachers about their the preconceptions of their students, you learn that many teachers even don't pay much attention to it and don't think it's that important. It's not their first priority. I think our students now in teacher training learn a little bit more than I did. There is more literature on preconceptions, for example, although often related to the physical geography and natural sciences. Some of them do some small researches, but I still think we need more thinking about this and what we can do with this. So I will engage you in my struggle. I'm interested in this topic for some time ago already. When for one important project was more than 10 years ago. I think it was Joe Stoltman who started to bring people all over the world together in Oxford maybe, and to look for joint research topics. And that might be like 20 years ago. And it ended up in one project in a collaboration with Shabatani and Liz Taylor and Vicky Sanders and Rob van der Vaart and myself. And at that time, there was a question of a gap between school geography and academic geography. One of the key publications, or first publication in geography education, was from Marsden. Everybody knows that on taking the geography out of geographic education. And we felt from different contexts that might be the case in our countries, or that we at least relate this type of questions. But we didn't know for sure, or we didn't know exactly what was happening. So that idea of that gap, we wanted to research it. We took a topic, the city, and we looked at what was happening in schools, in the curricula of those countries, in the textbooks. We interviewed teachers, what they're thinking is important, and they told us about what they teach. And we interviewed academics, urban and cultural geographers, about how they look at the city, how they study the city, what they think is important to learn about the city. So we could compare what was in the school happening and what was in academic geography happening. And well, a gap or no gap, at least you could see differences between it. And that's not a problem, because school knowledge doesn't have to mirror the academic knowledge. But you do hope that the school knowledge takes on the best knowledge we have. And you could question that. There was quite some differences in that. And then already we thought, well, we need another perspective. We need the students as well. So we engaged with the students, we had them draw the city. They told us what they learned about the city. They told us about what they would like to learn about the city. And then we saw another gap. At least the students had problems to connect in any way what they learned about the city with their life in the city. So that was a new puzzle to us. And to be honest, maybe there was a stronger connection between what the students taught us and what the academics taught us. Maybe strikingly, maybe not at all, because these academics study everyday life in the city. So that was the beginning. But since then, well, then you have those three types of knowledges, if you like, where I will try to tell more about. But since then, I think a lot happened, or was already happening, but we were not connected to that. But we are now where the idea of powerful knowledge is taken up in the geography education community, as written here as part of my summary. I think you could have written. The idea of powerful knowledge is at the core of work theorizing the contribution of geography education to human development and capability. It can equip young people with an enhanced ability to think geographically and make them better placed and more capable of achieving their potential to live a truly human life. This refers to the GeoCapabilities project. However, it demands more thinking about the young people we teach and how it connects to their everyday knowledge. So I like to know more how to understand everyday knowledge, what's set in theory, what did we do in GeoCapabilities, how is this related to school and academic knowledges, what are those boxes, and how could or should we take it into account when we select, teach, and learn powerful knowledge? I don't have answers to all these questions, but let's try. So, starting from a theoretical perspective, you have to go back to Bernstein and to Michael Young and how they were thinking about this. I started reading them a little bit, but I read more of others who really dived into their writings. A quote from Michael Young: if we look to powerful knowledge, it refers to what the knowledge can do or what intellectual power it gives to those who have access to it. Powerful knowledge provides more reliable explanations and new ways of thinking about the world, and acquiring it can provide learners with a language for engaging in political, moral, and all kinds of debates. Clearly, Young is referring to what is the heart of a discipline. You know, its theories, its models, its key ideas, the way to understand the world from thought done, work done in academia. If we look to these knowledges again, and here we clearly talk about school knowledge and the relation with the scholarly knowledge. And a way Bernstein is looking at it and those connections is from the idea of recontextualization. You have a field of production where new knowledges are produced and positioned. The new knowledges or new ways of thinking Young is referring to. You have a field of recontextualization where that field of production, you know, we select from, we change it, we adapt it to something that becomes educational knowledge, often done outside school, but in the educational environment, the societal environment. And then there is the field of reproduction, where there is the teacher who provides the pedagogic transmission, where acquisition takes place. So this is what they tell us about, or a short selection about what they tell us about this relationship. Then another quote from Michael Young, if we look to the connection to everyday knowledge. Powerful knowledge is to enable all students to acquire knowledge that takes them beyond their experience. It is knowledge which many will not have access to at home, among their friends, or in their communities in which they live. As such, access to this knowledge is the right of all future citizens. So this tells us a little bit of what it's not. and refers to everyday knowledge. In his words, but more, I think, in what Bernstein wrote, you have a horizontal discourse that's outside school. That's the everyday knowledge that you gain from experience and from practice in your daily life. It is often common sense knowledge, it's usual knowledge, it's not specialized, it's thinking. And on the other hand, they distinguish this from a vertical discourse. This is the school knowledge, what you assess in formal institutions of education. Not common sense, sometimes counterintuitive, unusual, specialized, and often the quote is made from Bernstein, to think the unthinkable, and that's what happens in the vertical discourse. Or said in another way, common sense or horizontal everyday knowledge is about subjective experiences, mental processes. The other side is about the products of thinking, systematic knowledge. So if you look from these theoretical perspectives, the distinction is more between the everyday knowledge and this vertical discourse, useful knowledge and academic knowledge. Bernstein is talking about the discursive gap between those two. I'll come back to that a little bit later. Just a short example where Bernstein explains a first idea, a very simple idea of what is everyday knowledge and what is knowledge or specialized knowledge. He's talking about a classification based on a material base, and the material base is that what you learn in your own environment at home, and on an indirect relation to a material base. So that is specialized. And they were doing a small project. How can we have a look at students and how they classify, and based on what kind of classifications. So into schools, and they didn't want to do something that had a lot with language, because that's difficult for kids and it's hard to compare. And they had kids from lower socioeconomic background and middle class kids. So they worked with pictures, and all kids eat lunch at school. So they took pictures of food recognizable for all kids. They know what it is. And then they had them tasked to make groups of those pictures. And they had to do it another type of grouping. And then you saw the differences that some kids make groups based on their personal experience and what they know. It's, I like these things and I don't like these things. Or these things I have for breakfast. Or these are the things my mom makes for me. So all based on your own experiences. Other kids made distinctions based on, for example, well, these are vegetables, or these products come from the sea. But it's another type, not direct experiences, but another type of classification. Not so much for today, but very interesting was related to, if you think about social justice, is that the kids from the lower income groups were not able to make that second type of grouping. They make a variation in types of groupings on their own experiences. While kids with a more middle class background, the first thing they do is make that second type of categorizations. And if you have to redo it, they also draw on the first. But just an idea of differences between thinking. Okay, then to geography education and the powerful knowledge debate and how it is taken up in the geography education community. I think many people work with these ideas, especially I think we have to refer to David Lambert, who took up in the London discussion, social realist discussion, but many more became involved, and one of the important projects where it was taken up is the geocapabilities. That builds on 3 pillars and powerful knowledge with a high tiny goal to try to increase the capabilities of young people. The teacher play an important role in this, in their curriculum making activities. If you look on what is done, although more and more is done, that's opening kind of boxes are open still, is that there was a lot of emphasis on connecting with the academic discipline. So on the school knowledge and the scholarly knowledge, I think we have been thinking a lot on that part, although we have always said it is important to consider who we teach. But then maybe you have seen something in creating the vignettes and thinking through all those, was identifying the powerful knowledge from the disciplinary knowledge, of course, relating to those we teach. So we have seen all kinds of things, and also more in a theoretical way, as Sirpa presented yesterday, with the aims of geography education as a way to see powerful knowledge. Maud has done it in a more operationalized way in his 4 or 5 types of knowledges. So I have tried to write a bit on it. So there are all kinds of work thinking about how in our discipline we can define powerful knowledge. That's a discussion in itself also, because the type of disciplines Bernstein and Jung were referring to from the beginning were more in the natural sciences. The type of definitions they gave for powerful knowledge, it's obvious or easy to connect to physics or chemistry. You have to rethink for geography, but that's done as well as for history, as for music, so it's taken up in a broader way. Okay, so work with this, but also many questions raised, and it was debated as well. There are many things to discuss here and are discussed related to these ideas. I think 2 of them relate, 2 important ones relate to that everyday, and that word everyday knowledge. One of them, I think Margaret Roberts is the first who addressed it. This is not about pedagogy. So this is not about how to learn and not about the teaching. So Margaret was challenging this. So how can you, well, not look at the everyday knowledge? Or how can you say everyday knowledge is not part of the curriculum? Because it is so important in geography education. But we have to think or have in mind that this is not about the pedagogy. Esther Vernon, a little bit more about her later as a geography teacher, says that, well, you know, everyday knowledge in a pedagogical and didactical way, you can always use that in all stages of your teaching. It is up to the teacher when you think you need to address to the everyday knowledge. But that's different from the theoretical perspective. The second issue with everyday and everyday knowledge is that we study the everyday from the academic discipline. And that's also confusing, I think, in some ways. As I said in our first example, what the students were thinking and were interested in was connected to what the researchers and academics are doing. Because that everyday experiences and everyday life is part of our academic discipline, for example, in children's geographies, but also in other geographies, etc. So it's good to think that everyday knowledge or that everyday experiences and the children's geographies probably belong here in the scholarly knowledge. But it is a confusing word for us now and then, thinking about geography. Another thing maybe is a comment what needs to be addressed, and that's one box still open, is this doesn't help us yet to really select content. Yeah. The type of knowledges, but you need more to really know what to teach. Roger Ferd and more recently Gabriel Blatt and his colleagues did interesting work on that, drawing on, for example, Klafki, bringing in with this type of ideas of powerful knowledge in a way to help thinking about how to select knowledge. And here I have the two gaps presented as well. Richard Buston, who did his PhD and wrote a book in the context of the Geocapabilities project. It was one of his motivations to start working on that because he sees that he experienced the differences between school knowledge and scholarly knowledge or academic knowledge, and maybe even as a great divide. And the second divide or gap also identified by Tine was that one between everyday. So a lot of questions raised in this perspective, and I'd like to add to this recent work from Vernon. You see, I'm going in the wrong direction here. That might help us a little bit to think about this. Esther Vernon is a geography teacher, and she did an amazing work published in the Curriculum Journal, quite tough to read, but also I think made more accessible in Geography Journal, the English one. She is drawing on, she really dives into the original literature, starting from Jung, and Jung is building on Durkheim and now a name is, well, I will remember in a few minutes. So the original thinkers and how you can look to this from a specific subject or discipline as geography. And she describes a bit more on how this discursive gap can be seen between the subject, the discipline, and the everyday. It's just the words of Bernstein. You have to cross this discursive gap as a young person or as a person to learn. And what you do by crossing that gap is that you learn to take distance and not longer be in the world of experience, but that you can look to an object from what we know about that object, about the world. So it is a process of distancing and objectification. And you need to be able to describe that world. So you need language in order to, school subject language, disciplinary language to describe the world as an object. And you can do that by systematization, using concepts and linking concepts. Michael Jung phrases it as a connecting capability. Working on making connections, and on conceptualizing to be able to also think in alternatives, alternative futures. What is interesting, I think, for us as thinking about it's problematic every day that has many connotations for us as geographers, is that Esther Vernon uses the words of epistemic self and empirical self. I think she's drawing on Gamble, and she says, well, you can see the empirical self connected to the everyday and your feelings, emotions, thinking processes. And you can see the epistemic self as related to the subject and the school. People like Winch are writing about epistemic access and epistemic assent, being able to think in more abstract ways, sometimes used in our debates as like higher order thinking skills, to be able to go on the vertical ladder in the subject and in the discipline. And then this picture on the right is what Esther Vernon concludes for our subject and for geography, that it maybe it's kind of a journey or walk from between those two knowledges. So that it's not, the direction is from the content, but that you go from the real life to the more abstract and back and forth. So she's talking about a ladder, and you're going up and down. And I think that's an interesting thought. I have a quote from her I'd like to read, maybe in order to explain a bit better. Yes, so she is talking about a spiral or a ladder. You are climbing up and down, and you move between types of knowledges, between abstraction and reality. And what she says is the relationship is fundamentally top-down. That's the solid arrow, but the process communicated, involving active effort and reasoning with the epistemic self. And that's the dashed arrows, where you have the tensions between inner and outer cognitive and affective. This type of thing. So I was wondering if this can help us a little bit further. No, wrong direction, sorry. So I tried to build in the spiral between the everyday knowledge and the school knowledge, and the empirical self and the epistemic self. This is the discursive gap. You have to bridge. That's why there is really a distinction between everyday knowledge and school knowledge. And maybe you have to be explicit about this. And the relationship, of course, with the scholarly knowledge. Okay, an example. I had this thinking done, and then I tried to observe, can I see anything of this in what we've been doing? And this is based on just one case study in a geocapabilities project, 2 teachers, 1 school, and it was not mentioned to test this. So it's not a test, it's just how to think about those knowledges and relationships when looking into teaching, geography teaching. It was about migration in the geocapabilities context. It was at the Gregorius school, the Sint Gregorius College nowadays. This is an old school in the city center of Utrecht in the Netherlands. It is traditionally a Roman Catholic school, but I think there are much more Muslim kids now, Catholic kids. It is very heterogeneous student population. It is a school under big pressure, not performing as inspection would like to have, and that's related to exam results, to the background of the kids, lower intakes, and all kind of problems. So teachers are under pressure. And this is to be read in the story map of the teachers on the Due Capabilities website. A little context. That's what I already said to you. It's hard to find time for the teachers to do what they really want to do and what they prefer to do, because they are really under pressure to perform in the exams, and there are all kinds of problems at school. Who do they teach? They really want to do this project with the pre-vocational kids. In the Netherlands, you are selected already from 11, 12 to go to pre-vocational, either on the other end, pre-university teaching. 2 teachers, and it is 4 years, that program, and the kids are in year 2 and year 4. They have kind of limited literacy levels. And these kids, there is, I think, a majority with parents or grandparents with a Moroccan background origin, but this is a really mixed group. Also some refugee kids. There are only a few kids without a migration background. Well, what do these teachers aim for in this project? They really wanted to connect that everyday life of their kids with and their personal geographies with the teaching. They perceived that as well. They even had more problems in the way migrants and the places where they live, the neighborhoods, are presented and represented in, for example, textbooks and geography. And they really think that they have to, or they need to support these kids in their self-confidence because of current debate and political issues about immigration, that they are allowed to be who they want to be. They are. Looking for geographical knowledge and powerful knowledge, we came next to what needs to be taught, they are under pressure, to the concept of home. Not taught at all in school, not used at all in school, but in geography, an important concept and a multi-layered concept that was interesting to use. Because home, you can see it as the house where you live, but it has many more connotations. It is also an imaginary. It is connected to feelings. For migrants, there's often a national connection. Where are you from? And that's always referring to a national identity or background. But maybe the question, where do you feel at home, is more important. In the context of transnationality, there are more local spaces, places where people feel at home. And we used work from Tine Béneker, who said there are 3 things who make your home feeling, and that is the combination of the rituals, what do you do at that place, who are you related to, and what are the restrictions you are in front of you. Are you allowed to be there or not? So at school, the teachers had to look for what we call an artifact. Not going to explain. They had to really struggle with that, and in the end, they chose this picture of a rapper called Booth, and he is a kind of contested person, and they thought it was like a provocative with the kids. They like this guy, or to think about this guy, and he has a kind of migration story. I think Algerian parents lived in France, the Netherlands, Canada back. And now they show him with his favorite football club. And 072 refers to a city and the code of that city. And that's a city, not that big city, AZ Alkmaar in the Netherlands. So they discussed with the students, where will he be at home and why? And then they had two series of lessons, a bit different, of course, for year 2 and year 4. They stayed quite close to the textbook. They feel they have to, or to the exam program, but they took up those ideas of feeling at home. And one of the important things that the students do was to look for their family background, family tree, for example, and to interview family members or people. I think I'm going to speed up a little bit. Part of the project was an evaluation at the end. And what we did was there were small groups of students. There were 2 students from year 2 after, I think, 6 weeks or maybe 2 months after the teaching of some lessons on migration. They had this task of a concept mapping, and there were concepts, some quite abstract concepts, I think, for them to organize and to talk about and be evaluated the project and so on. What was striking, those 2 girls came in, and one of those girls first was a bit uncertain, and she asked, what is migration? You know, the word migration is, even after the teaching, but 2 months later, it is still a difficult word. So we had to help her a little bit, and then, okay, she remembered, and the other one as well. And what they did when making the concept map was first, well, you start with a problem, otherwise there's nothing. So we start with a problem. And then they ordered all the concepts telling the family story. So they related the organization of the concept to what was happening and what they learned about their family migration story. So afterwards, I'm thinking about what, Vernon says and relating everyday knowledge to school knowledge. I think there was a way of moving, maybe the beginning of it, of connecting everyday knowledge to some first basic simple concepts. They also could make their own concepts or fill in new ones, the red ones, when they added to it. Some of them they didn't use, also because they thought it's not relevant for us. But you saw them thinking from their own background. In year 4, we could look at the products they made. They made an inquiry assignment, and they produced a product, and we could review that. And the teacher was surprised in the way students were that open and willing to tell about what they think about migration and feeling at home. And you can see in this that they understood in a way the multi-layeredness of the concept of home. For example, the second quote, a home is here for us, generations, differences. They feel at home in Utrecht. They are connected to the city and to the neighborhood. They want to live there and stay there. But for my parents, home will always be where they come from. They feel at home there. It is a different kind of home. You have a home, but also home that really feels at home. So, they could make all kinds of connections. You also see that they have different connotations and understand that relations, for example, are important. So in this work, we could see that the school knowledge was connecting the everyday knowledge and the more scholarly knowledge. Not big research, but just trying to think through what happens. So this is what I can make of it, looking from those teaching migration into classes. That there was a beginning of that spiral going over that gap from everyday knowledge to school knowledge. That they draw on migration histories and the differences between generations. That they connect it to the basic concept of why migration is happening, or reasons for it, for push and pull, etc. And that we could bring in some new and maybe relevant for their own perspectives, the geographies. Okay, then last one, and I'm doing a bit short, I think, to Lauren Hammond. This was the journey from powerful knowledge and the theoretical part to a more applied thing. Lauren Hammond took the route from diving into children's geographies and then looking to also the context of geocapabilities and the connection between everyday and school. She didn't research school. She worked with kids in London and had all kinds engaged with them. They produced all kinds of narratives on the city, on their identity. They thought it was important, on territory, or turf, and protection of space, and on the city as place of hope, but also as place of inequalities. And she has done really interesting work with those kids. And what's coming up from their narratives, she's trying to translate into what could be important for teaching geography in a capabilities framework. She uses also a kind of framework, a triangle, and sees this as the borders, but as well as linkages between those domains. What's different here is that she starts as a researcher from geography as part of everyday life. So this is on the part of the children's geographies domain. And I do jump to her conclusions, but that's doing short on her. There's much more that we can learn from her work. But she's from her London case, because you cannot translate it to everywhere, and also from a geocapable perspective, she's telling us these kind of things. That it is important to see young people not only as students, but as beings, who have ideas, who want things, who feel things, and that knowing about their identity is very important to be able to select, for example, the right knowledge. Knowledge of the children derived from both disciplinary knowledge, also from children's geographies and subdiscipline, and interactions with children can enable to make informed decisions in curriculum. She found that the young people she worked in have an interest in their place, their territory, how it is constructed and reconstructed. So they have an interest in and complex relationships to the geographical concepts of place and time space. These concepts enable children to think about their everyday lives in different ways. One last, maybe also interesting observation, and not only for geography but for education, is that these children were interested in geographies of education and questions about the purpose of school. discussing with her what they learn at school, that they frame really as achieving exam results in this British context, versus that you also can learn about your own life or the city, the place where you live, and what's happening there, and that it's a way to relate to what you encounter. One quote from her, the value of children's geographies to geography education in schools ultimately lies in crossing borders between the different spaces, the triangle of geographical thought. Geography as a discipline increasingly questions whose geography. It represents peoples and places, and where appropriate, it advocates for change. School geography can and should have a role in this change. Okay, I think I got a few minutes more from Martin because of our delay, so it's time to finish. And to sum up of what I've learned so far in this struggle, I think in the idea of powerful knowledge, the distinction between everyday knowledge and school knowledge is quite fundamental. And crossing it is essential, and maybe addressing it more explicitly, thinking about that, is necessary. Vernon's idea of navigating between the everyday and the school geography knowledge from the purpose of learning about the world as an object of thought, I think has potential for further exploration. And it relates to all kinds of open boxes, paper, progressions, maybe kind of other related work. For bridging that everyday knowledge to school knowledge and vice versa, knowing the young people we teach, who they are, their experiences, knowledges is of major importance. For geography education, I think I see it as a challenge, but as a real opportunity. The geography in the life of young people and the discipline of children's geographies brings in an extra valuable dimension. And moreover, related to what I said earlier, I think academic geographical knowledge offers greater potential to bridge this gap in meaningful ways than used nowadays. And connected to all this, I think we do not know much, or only have limited insight on how geographical concepts work in this thinking. So there are different meanings and functions of these concepts in school knowledge and academic geography, and how we can use geographical concepts in studying and understanding young people's everyday lives is limited as well. So that's my struggle, and there are many open questions and answers. Well, you can tell me if you already knew, and maybe even know that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tine, for your interesting and, in my point of view, inspiring keynote. And yeah, although we have respect to the time schedule, I think we still have enough time for questions and comments, if there are any.
Coffee is most.
Yeah, many. I can't see right now. So, Matthias? No.
Is it possible just to lay the bibliography in order to see it?
Yeah, but it's recorded, so you can see afternoon. Well, we have something in chat from
yesterday.
It's yesterday. No, it's today. Yes. So, some comments from Fra.
I think there are people in the room who maybe from other perspectives, but I've done work related to it. Caroline was talking about experiential geography. That's a box, I think, that's open. People I have seen but could not attend the presentations on preconceptions. I think it's another box.
Yeah. I saw that Peter raised his hand. Peter?
Yeah, it was just addressed. Thank you so much. I really wanted to ask about, the interconnectedness of, I'm thinking, for example, about Sibylle Reinfried and Armin Remfland, many people who have done a lot of work on preconceptions, conceptual change, and actually grasping what you've been struggling to describe as ties between everyday knowledge and school knowledge and academic knowledge. So there are kind of well-explored ties in this area, particularly from science education, but also in geography education. So I was wondering if opening those particular boxes that are very present in our community is anytime soon on the agenda, because I do believe that that's one of our strengths. And before running to academic geography, again, in terms of children's geography, with this nice, but many things that they're uncovering are everyday practice that teachers actually do, and they do consider children as beings in classrooms. I have to act as if they didn't do that just because children's geographies are uncovering these things. So I was wondering how actually you wanted to move this forward through your own ideas by actually emphasizing this strength of geography education. If I remember correctly, that was one of David Lambert's last statements on this, that we as geography educators and the community of geography educators have to move this forward from within our strength and not necessarily always looking to the left and right, but just basically have our own voice. And you being a keynote and an expert in the field, I was wondering how you will move on this debate into this direction. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Peter, and well, exactly what you say. I think there is a lot what we should connect. My struggle was to start the thinking now from that conception of powerful knowledge and what was written there. But I know there is a lot that I could not incorporate, but I would like to do, and I think it connects, for example, very well to the work done on progression and how to bring that further. And I think we have a challenge in the subject. I think Joop is looking as well, referring to our miles wide and inches deep school knowledge versus and the epistemic ascent we may be looking for. So I'm a little bit an expert, but I couldn't overview everything. So I really would like. I think it's a very important topic for our school subject, and also for to present to others, and how people will look at our school subject, apart from what we really would like to achieve anyway. I think maybe I was too hard. Maybe it's a bit too hard on Lauren in Hammond, in the way that she was a teacher for many years, and of course teachers and many teachers see their students as beings, as for example the two teachers at the Gregorius College as well. But in the literature, of course, it's also often, and in the debate, about students and students' performances, and in the sense of the capabilities. Well, I think that's a point she made. But I need your help, and from all of you. That's why I said in the beginning, there are more experts or better experts on certain fields here in the room.
First question from Caroline.
No, it's mostly a remark. I would like to thank you for your very interesting keynote, and I think you destroy a myth, which is that you learn what knowledge coming from geographic researcher. And I think you're right. We need to link scholar knowledge, scholarly knowledge, and also common knowledge, everyday knowledge. And for me, it's the link between geo capabilities and powerful knowledge and experiential geography. Now we need to develop a link between the two in order to take into account the everyday knowledge. And I think if we go on that way, we will make a very important advance in research and to improve the geography education. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think Chuhan.
Hi, Tina. Thank you so much for a very interesting presentation. I really enjoyed it. I have a comment not specific to your presentation per se, but something that we all can think about as geography educators. And I think it's a rallying call, right? Referring to the work done in academic geography in a way to bridge the kinds of powerful disciplinary knowledge to the everyday knowledge. But I want to bring up two issues that are very practical for all teachers, and that's one of time and the other one of connection, a theme for this conference, really. So one can imagine you probably need to go to different experts in the academic geography arena, because academic geography is also divided into many subdomains, right? A transport geographer would say very different, produce very different kinds of knowledges from, say, a climatologist, and etc. But as school geography educators, we know that we have to cover a broad range of these disciplinary subdomains that just form topics in geography education, right? We do not necessarily only approach our teaching from the perspective of topics, but rather look at it across. So imagining how curriculum developers and how teacher professional developers will have to engage multiple touch points in academic geography to bridge those gaps. So one main concern is time. How do we try to maximize the time? And that brings me to my second point on connections. I suppose as a community, we may not even know enough connections to our expert others within academic geography discipline, right? So what are the best ways for us to maximize connections given the limited amount of time? So something broad to kind of like add on to the discussion, and I wonder if you have some thoughts on it, Tina. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I think you're right, and we can't. I think we can't put that on the shoulders of the teachers. You know, I think it's a role for us, and to rethink. I've seen some networks that work well, you know, with a specialist as we are, and connecting teachers and then other academics. So I think that's a way forward, to think of that type of networks. And on the other hand, I think we have to think how we can maximize that, or what we, you know, also how to engage geography researchers to write and speak for teachers. I think some of them are really willing to share, you know, and are interested as well in what the teachers have to tell. But they have time pressure as well. Yeah. But I think there is a reevaluation, at least in my university, on the way researchers are evaluated. So that your impact, in a way, in the geography education community is of value as well. So maybe there's hope in that sense.
Okay. I think No more?
David.
David Mitchell?
Yeah.
Oh, David Mitchell, David, please.
Hey, yes, thank you very much, Tina. I found that really interesting and helpful, your presentation. I was just thinking about pedagogy and particularly inquiry pedagogy, for example, the work of Margaret Roberts in all of this, because I think it's, as I say, really helpful, the attention that you've drawn to these gaps and the question of academic geography, children's geography, school geography. But how far do you think that taking the approach of attention to pedagogy and try teachers' efforts to engage children and young people, whatever the abstract concepts, whatever the school geography they're trying to teach, with attention to academic geography, but trying to connect to the children's lives through a certain pedagogical approach of inquiry. Because you didn't say a lot about that. What's your thoughts about inquiry approach?
Well, I think it depends much on what we do in that approach, isn't it? I think Michael Solomon was referring to it in his keynote, that it can be a F2 way of teaching inquiry approaching, and you have a risk in a kind of same way. What I notice, for example, with the teachers in the Gregorius College, that they are happy with the everyday stories of the students, but then they forget to take the next step and to really connect it to the concepts, you know, and what we're learning. But I think it in my perspective, it's more a misunderstanding, or that Margaret Roberts was that alarmed by what Michael Young said, because what she's doing in a way fits really well in opening up powerful knowledge for young people. But I don't know. I don't know, David. What do you think?
Well, what I was thinking was, I think it's a really good idea to pay attention to children's geographies and pay attention to, and time looking at the discipline and the cutting edge of how academic geography is exploring young people's lives. But I think there's always going to be a huge challenge. The point of time has been made for teachers. Access to all of that new disciplinary knowledge and making those connections. So I think that maybe emphasis on the inquiry approach, so attention to making those connections between children's lives and the abstract geographical concepts, might be a very fruitful use of energy, use of effort in teacher education, for example, to try to bridge that discursive gap, perhaps. So I just think it could be a fruitful source of the energies of teacher educators.
Yeah, I think Joop is addressing that problem of time, a lack of time. I don't know. He wants to add in this way.
Probably. Maybe the last comment.
Yeah.
Teresa?
Partially I got an answer, but I'm considering we have a lot of approach that brings up full knowledge or some kind of this thinking into education, like problem-based learning, quiet-based learning, and so on. What's the most challenging thing is that we have to restructure the curriculum, or that we have to born different textbooks or as a core for teachers. There's a biggest problem?
Well, maybe you don't have to do it always and every time and with every topic. But I think we need to know a bit more how this relates to each other, you know, the world of thinking of the students and the world of thinking in the school subject, and how you can cross that without necessarily doing big projects in problem-based learning or inquiry-based learning. But if you make sometimes their lives part of what they are learning, and do not forget to connect to the concepts, I think it's a win-win in that case. That's what the students give back as well, that they find it inspiring and it helps them in a way. Of course, then you have to look carefully as a teacher if you think that you have moved enough in what you wanted to learn and not stay with only the humanistic side, but bring in, for example, a structural perspective. What do you think? What is
For me, it's
the biggest challenge?
our role.
Yeah.
As you said.
Yeah.
To teach.
Yeah.
Prospective teachers. To work.
But I think there are examples. There are teachers that's not doing this, so it could be a way to look and to find examples.
Okay, thank you all. Time flies. So I can thank you, Tine, for your keynote.